Don Faul.
Quick notes. First is this place is, I think, a San Francisco treasure. I actually think this is a national treasure. There's no other institution like this. You go to the Army Navy Club, and it's not half as nice, in my opinion. And I say this as an Army guy. And I, I'm on the board, but I think it's because they needed a token Asian Army guy. But I will say that it is an amazing place. And I hope that more of you all tell your friends, family members, fellow service members to utilize the space. And there's incredible events. Just 2 days ago, Nate Fick was here. He said that he served with you and had great things to say about you. And just incredible folks have started this institution, continue to shepherd and lead it. General Mike Rocco, thank you very much. And can't say enough good things about it. We're obviously going to be listening from Don Faul today, but it would be remiss to not mention the gym. So the gym has reopened here. It's an incredible gym. There's a swim pool here and great athletic facilities, a pull-up bar, and if you want to challenge me to a pull-up competition after this, I welcome it. The one more note is a couple days ago, a incredible Marine that Jeff and I got to know at Stanford Law School passed away, Pete McCloskey. And I think it's worth mentioning, and such an incredible human being. For me and Jeff, when we transitioned to Stanford Law School, he came and gave a talk on a Memorial Day. And he was one of the first, I would say, successful veterans I saw as a transitioning civilian. I was like, wow, like this person could build a great career, congressman, representing the local area. Of the thing that I really respect about Pete McCloskey that probably no one will know, or very few people know, is that obviously served in the Marines, served during the Korean War, but he was responsible for Earth Day. And I mean, you typically don't think a Marine is responsible for Earth Day. And so I like to make fun of Marines just because I'm an Army guy, and believe me, I get it 10 times back as much. But he's an incredible human being, and I think he's impacted our world in a significant way, and just wanted to make sure we recognize Pete McCloskey. Today, I am going to interview someone I often call Captain America, and I say this because he's just had an incredible career. Served in Iraq and Afghanistan, force recon. For an Army person, I don't know what that means, but apparently Marines think that's a big deal. Then went to Stanford. Actually, I'm not going to go through all the minutiae. I told Don before this, this might seem a little scary to him, but I've probably watched like 8 to 10 hours of like interviews he's done over the past year. So I feel like I know a lot about CrossFit, a lot about his career, but keep in mind, 3 hours of that is Jocko Willink interviewing him. So 7 hours is the other interviews. But I'm not going to do full justice to Don's incredible career. And I'll note, and I know I'm skipping all over the place, that I think Don's next 30 years are going to be so much more impactful than the past few decades. But Stanford Business School, before that, he was ski bumming in Colorado. He was a bartender, and he did that so he could like ski, wake up late. The one clip from Jocko that I thought was really funny was Don trying to be humble, and he is, and he's like, no, I can't grow my hair long, it like frays or something at the. I found that amusing. And then after business school, he interned at Google, went to Google, then rode that rocket ship. Then was like, okay, what's another rocket ship? Went to Facebook, rode that rocket ship, and it's like, wait a second, I like rocket ships. Then went to Pinterest, rode that rocket ship, and let's just say he's been riding a lot of rocket ships, and these are incredible companies that he's helped scale. Another random anecdote is, there's this, is it Silicon Monkeys? It's Marquez. This guy wrote a book about Silicon Valley, and there's a brief anecdote of Don Faul. I forgot what the book title is called, but it's like a
Is it Chaos Monkeys?
Chaos Monkeys.
Yeah.
So Chaos Monkeys, by the way, I highly recommend the book. I analogize it to, by the way, I'll stop talking soon. Unless you're like, wait a second, we came for Don, not this army guy. I promise you I'll stop talking soon. But in Chaos Monkeys, Don's mentioned in that book, and he's like, this is the guy who like helped make Facebook run on time, and like Sheryl Sandberg gets all the glory, but like in the room, here's Don, her right-hand man, like making the ships run on time. And so Don's, even in our, how should I say, our Silicon Valley Liars Poker history book. After Pinterest, he decided to go join a startup, and then after that, Athos, and then took on the leadership of CrossFit. CrossFit, as many people in the military know, an incredible company, an incredible community. Of all the words that Don has probably been saying for the past year, it's community. In every single episode, it's community. So I will stop yabbering for a bit and kick off with actually a very difficult question. And that is, CrossFit is at an interesting moment in its development. And I'm curious, how are you leading the company? How do you think about it? And there's so many things that like 30 million people in 2030.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you guys. Thanks for hosting me here. This is a special place. I've been in the Valley now. So I got off active duty in 2003, moved up here in 2004 to go to grad school, met my wife, and have lived here since. And have a lot of memories of being here at the Marines Memorial. You know, I think while I haven't been on active duty in a long time, like everybody here is part of a really special tribe. Like being a Marine will always be a core part of who I am, and having the opportunity over the years to spend time here. I celebrated my 40th birthday here with, you know, the people who are closest to me in my life. I've had a bunch of really incredible engagements and events here. So it's special for me to spend some time, and I'm really grateful for it. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy lives. Yeah, getting back to your question, gosh, we could spend the entire hour on that. So, you know, CrossFit, as a tiny bit of context to kind of set up the question, CrossFit's been around for about 24 years now, been around a long time. You know, CrossFit in really basic terms, it's a fitness methodology. We've got 13,000 gyms around the world, millions of people who do CrossFit now. CrossFit was founded by a mercurial founder who had a real vision and had a host of real challenges as well, to put it in simple terms. You know, you'll often hear CrossFit's a cult. That's not all wrong. It's probably more right than it's wrong. You know, CrossFit, by virtue of who started it, how it was founded, and probably mostly the impact that it's had on people's lives. You know, the number of folks whose lives have been impacted and changed by CrossFit is pretty meaningful and profound. What that means for us is we've got a community of people, millions of people, for whom CrossFit's a part of their identity. It's part of how they think about themselves. It's part of their social circle. It's part of how they express themselves. We are at a point, I started this job about 1.5 years ago. You know, CrossFit is at that point, 22 years old, and was at kind of in the midst of an existential crisis. This founder, who had real vision, came pretty close to blowing the entire thing up. Huge PR meltdown. The organization itself, for an organization that has created such an incredibly warm and inclusive community, had some real elements within it internally that were pretty toxic culturally. And so I came in 2022 to, accompany a brand, a community that had touched millions of people, that had had this huge impact in the world, but was at an inflection point where a lot of folks were concerned about, is this thing going to stick around, or is it going to implode? And so for the last 1.5 years, we as a team have been working on, how do we take this incredible brand and this community that has influenced so many people, and how do we usher in a new phase of growth? How do we build on the great things that CrossFit has done? How do we shift and change the really problematic parts of our culture, problematic parts of kind of how we operate? So it is, in simple terms, to some degree, a bit of a turnaround, which is a little bit weird to say when you have the largest fitness chain in the world, but we have to fundamentally shift our strategy. We have to fundamentally shift our culture. And we have to do so not only for our team of 160, 170 employees, but by virtue of how passionate people are about CrossFit, our community pays attention to and feels ownership for everything we do. So when we make changes, we hear about it from 13,000 gym owners, tens of thousands of coaches. It dominates social media. And so we, in simple terms, if I had to boil down the challenge in front of us, we have a mandate and requirement to evolve and change in a community that is highly skeptical and fearful of change. And so it's a really challenging proposition. I'll be honest, we're still figuring it out. I've been there a year and a half. It is, by a huge margin, the hardest job I've ever had. Like, it's not even close. There's not a close second place. And it's harder it's harder strategically, it's harder culturally, the change management's more difficult. Little things are incredibly difficult, but we're making progress. So, at the core of it, to oversimplify things, and I think this will resonate with the audience, at the core of all of this is us leading with, with principle, with inspiration. This is really an exercise in extraordinary leadership. I tell that to our team all the time. The hard thing isn't necessarily figuring out what to do. Some of the answers are relatively straightforward. It's inspiring and motivating and bringing along our team of 160 people and our community of acolytes, cult members, and giving them the confidence that this thing that they love that has changed their life, that we can preserve the parts of it that are so fundamentally special that they love, while evolving to make sure that CrossFit's around for a really long time, that we can build a strong and healthy business. So, it is a meaningful challenge, but I knew that was a huge part of what attracted me to the role.
I jumped right into a really difficult question, kind of intentionally to kind of like just get us right to
Yeah.
it. And but I'm going to promise you make it a lot easier and talk about
all good. Let's
your military
talk about the hard stuff
and how it impacts you. The scale of CrossFit is incredible. 150 countries. I feel like you have roughly the same number of employees
That's
as
right.
you have for country coverage. Mm-hmm. And the more I've listened to you talk about CrossFit and learned about CrossFit, it feels like the DoD and Marines in many ways. Mm-hmm. Like, people are criticize it the most, but are also the most passionate. Mm-hmm. And it feels like this is like a great setup. You're gonna think I'm crazy by saying this, by like a future SecDef role, where like you have so many people who have their own views on how to run things.
Yeah.
And it's how they did it in the past. And the past seems like a lot better. And what's the future gonna hold? I want to go back way back now, and I wanted to ask you, what lessons have you learned from military service that have been applicable across your different stints in the civilian sector?
Yeah, there's a kind of long list of things. I say if there's the two most important things that I think have been most profound, and they seem very straightforward, but they're actually easy to say, hard to do. First is, without question, the Marine Corps is where I learned principled servant leadership. And that is, I think for all of us in the room, we understand what that means. We understand how powerful it is. It's incredibly rare. Having now spent 20 years outside the Marine Corps, I've been incredibly lucky to work at some incredible organizations that have had a lot of success. It's not commonplace. It's not easy to do. It is not the norm. It's really hard. And so I feel, really fortunate to have learned that at such an early formative stage of my life, and have that baked into my DNA. And so, that's the first one, and that is the hardest part of my job. Like, that is what I fall back on. And when I look at what's most important for CrossFit is finding other highly principled servant leaders who can serve their teams, who can serve our community. And so that's number one, without question. Number two, obviously we learn, you learn in the military how to deal with adversity. And again, that seems really straightforward and really simple. But I've been extraordinarily blessed in my life and career with, so many moments where things the cards fell in the right direction for me. But, in any career you have your ups and downs. My last two jobs, CrossFit, and then I was at a startup before this called Athos. Athos failed. I spent 7 years there. It was a phenomenal experience, but we ultimately didn't make it. Startup that didn't make it. And my entire 7 years there was ups and downs. It was one day thrilled we're going to make it. The next day we're going to fail. The next day we're going to make it. At CrossFit, last year was great. We had a great year. I came in at 22. The business was struggling. We had a really strong year. The first quarter of this year has been incredibly difficult. The last 3 weeks, it's been like gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. And, I know in that environment, things that we all know, my team, and now in CrossFit, the community is going to look to me in terms of how I show up. Okay, we got bad news. How do I show up? How do I handle it? What's the energy I channel? What's the path forward? Those are all things that I learned as a young Marine officer, and they're incredibly impactful.
What challenges did you face transitioning into the civilian sector?
I think the biggest challenge for me was figuring out what the hell I wanted to do. I was incredibly fortunate in my time in the Marines, had great jobs, great organizations, but I was, at that point, I was ready to transition. And I was really excited about this next chapter in my life. And then I remember coming to this moment where I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. I'm excited to do something else. And then all of a sudden, I have no idea what I want to do. And the initial, I remember this is, I was in San Diego, I was stationed at Pendleton, doing a bunch of interviews with jobs that made me question so quickly, what the hell am I thinking? How am I ever going to find anything that I'm good at and might actually enjoy? And I went through a period, grad school helped me with this, honestly, just giving me time and space, but it was really hard to figure out what I was well suited for, what actually might be a good fit. I didn't, personally want to go into, law enforcement or government service. So there wasn't that natural, obvious extension from the military. I wanted to do something different, but in terms of what, I didn't know how to think about different industries. I didn't know how to think about different roles. None of the titles made sense to me. I didn't know how to communicate. I was a knuckle dragger. I didn't know how to communicate my experience in a way that resonated with a 24-year-old recruiter who had no experience with the military. And I didn't understand how to think about and reflect on the nature of my experience in the Marines to really get to a level of what are the things I love. There are things that I could take away. I love being part of a high-functioning team. I love the privilege and opportunity of leadership. I like dynamic environments, generally more than static ones. Those are things that could have helped me figure out how to triangulate, but I was young and ignorant, and ultimately I just was really lucky, candidly, to kind of stumble my way into technology, and it ended up being a great fit for me. That was probably the hardest, initial challenge for me. And then, there's some obvious stuff. I'd say I was really worried initially. I remember going to grad school where, you've got a handful of veterans right in a class. So maybe you've got 5% of the class has prior military service. And the folks sitting next to you are former bankers, consultants, et cetera. Most of your classes are strategy classes, finance, marketing. I didn't know an answer to a single question the entire first year. And I remember thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing here? I literally bring nothing to the table. And then I remember, doing my first internship and getting my first job, and I was like, it turns out all that academic shit doesn't matter that much. It turns out actually that the things I took out of the Marine Corps are the most important things in the private sector as well. So, but it took me a little time to both appreciate and realize that. And, I'd say understand how to recognize the difference in cultural context so that I could apply all of those skills and lessons that I learned in the Marine Corps at Google, where, it turns out they don't drop the F-bomb in every other sentence like you do in the Marine Corps. So that took me a little bit of a course correction.
I'm not a psychologist, but as I've listened to you talk about CrossFit in your journey, it feels like your first 3 jobs, you had such smashing success. Google, Facebook, Pinterest. And it feels like you are taking some of these positions to prove that you can do other things besides join a rocket ship. Mm-hmm. How much do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think part of that's true. It's funny. I got out of the Marine Corps. I had this total imposter syndrome starting at Google. I didn't know anything. And then I spent 2 years there. I'm like, awesome. And then I was honestly stumbled into Facebook. I'm like, awesome. 4 years later, company goes public. Then I go to Pinterest. I'm like, this isn't that hard, guys. And then you realize like an idiot that 90% of it is literally you can map out right place at the right time. And yeah, of course, I worked hard and I did my best, and I really tried hard to be a great team player.
Don did massive things at Facebook. You
Yeah.
opened up the office in Ireland. You opened up so many different global offices. So
Sure, and I'm not trying to be overly diminish that, but I think you have to realize anyone who has had success, you have to realize that there are some times when like the chips are falling in your favor. Like my first internship, I was on the fence. Do I go to Google or Microsoft? This is at a moment when Google's the hottest company in the world. I was an idiot for even, not that Microsoft isn't amazing. It is. But at that moment in time, going to Microsoft, my life would be fundamentally different. Facebook, I got a random call from a buddy who said, what do you think about this? Everyone told me I was an idiot. Nobody left Google in 2006. Like that was the hottest company on the planet. And it wasn't like I had a lot of foresight and mapped out, like, it was like, that sounds cool, I'll go do that. So yeah, I worked hard, but a lot of it is realizing that like so much of this is serendipity and luck and making the most of it. And I came out of those three, I'd say came out of Google, Facebook, and Pinterest. Again, super fortunate to have those opportunities. And yeah, those were three companies where I joined rocket ships. Like the rocket had taken off. And yes, like I am proud of the work my teams did to support that. But I remember coming out of Pinterest and thinking about, okay, what do I do next? There were elements of those three jobs that were pretty similar. Fast scaling, consumer technology startups in operations role. I had the opportunity actually coming out of Pinterest to go to Airbnb. Would have been a very obvious like extension, great company, role that aligned pretty well with what I had done. But I remember thinking to myself at that point, like for me, a lot of my job transitions came at a point where I felt like I was ready to be stretched again. Where the job had, my learning curve had slowed down a little bit. And I remember thinking to myself, look, I have had the experience and had an impact at this type of company. I've never done an early stage startup. And I remember I met with, so one of our investors, a guy who I had worked with at Facebook. When I left Pinterest, I was catching up with him. He was running an investment firm at the time.
Briones.
Not John, no, this guy, Chamath Palihapitiya. Okay. And I met with Chamath and I was talking to him about, I had three companies I was looking at. One was Theranos. So this is, talk about luck and dodging a bullet. Seriously. At some point we'll do a whole nother podcast on that experience because it's insane. So it was Theranos. I actually got introduced to them by General Mattis. Crazy. Theranos, and then it was Airbnb, and it was this startup called Athos. And Athos was a company probably none of you have ever heard of. Outside of maybe knowing me, outside that you wouldn't, we didn't make it. Airbnb was I'd say earlier in its maturity, but is successful and prominent there. And I was really wrestling with like, do I go to Airbnb? It's a great brand. The business has been de-risked. The rocket's taken off. I'd spent time with their founder. I liked him a lot. Or do I go to Athos, this company no one's ever heard of? It hasn't gotten a product market fit yet. The rocket is still in assembly mode. And it's a role I've never done before. And I remember Chamath, who knew me reasonably well, was really savvy. He said, Don, like, you can take the Airbnb job. And look, like, you knew how to do that type of role. There'll be new things, but like, you've done that before. That's a good, safe option. This Athos job, you've never done it before. You might not be able to do it. So that's really the question you have to answer to yourself. I'm like, you son of a bitch, I'm going to Athos. I'm going to prove you wrong. But there was an element of that for me, for sure, that was, hey, I want to learn new things and I want to test myself in a new domain.
I think that's very military, sadomasochistic Marine.
For sure. Why did I go to the Force Reconnaissance? Because it's the hardest. That was a big part of it.
There's that whole quote, the obstacle is the way. I feel like you felt like this was an obstacle you had to. There's an interview where a very well-known CrossFitter interviews Don. He's like, you didn't Google what was happening with CrossFit when you took the job? Like, did you not know like what you were walking into?
Most people I talked to when I took the job, so my first week at CrossFit, we do a big event. It's kind of the end of our competition season called the CrossFit Games. We host it each year. It's a big moment for the community. My first week in the job was at the CrossFit Games, which was both insane and great. I got to meet a lot of people in person, but I literally met 5,000 people in like 3 days. Most people who I talked to, when it was announced I was taking the role, said, congratulations, why the hell would you ever take that job? It's impossible. Now I know what they're talking about.
The CrossFit community and the military community have some analogs. One thing about the military community that I find interesting in your journey is that it seems like there have been some people that have been helpful. And you also have turned around and helped folks. And I know like Jimmy Sopko is one of them. But I want to say oh, who's that other GSB guy? The story that I got when I was a student was this GSB Google guy that had
Roy Gilbert.
Roy
Yeah.
Gilbert, that's right. Had helped somewhat. Obviously, you had to get through the interview process. I'm curious, how has the military veteran community helped you throughout your journey?
Yeah, I mean, early on, when I moved up here, when I got off active duty and took my first job at Google, I knew of one other veteran. I knew of two other veterans at all of Google, and they probably had 3,000 employees. And I think at that point, the Valley was in a pretty different spot. I think I was in the, just timing wise, I'd say in the first front end of like post 9/11 veterans who were starting to get off active duty and transition into the private sector. LinkedIn didn't exist. There was no break line. There was no, Stanford Ignite. There were no feeder programs into the technology industry. And so you kind of had to figure out how to scrap your way. Really, the only path was through grad school program. So, if you could, finagle your way into grad school, you had a shot at doing it. And again, I remember showing up at Google, and it was Roy Gilbert and a guy named Russ Laraway. And, at a point in my life where I felt where a lot was unfamiliar and there were a lot of things that I was still learning, having folks where you've got those shared set of experiences and principles was huge for me. And Roy, so the story of Roy Gilbert. So I was at Stanford at the time, and I had this was my internship, and I was I had an offer from Microsoft that expired in like a week, so I had a week to decide, and I had submitted my resume to Google, had heard nothing, and Roy, who was working full time, he was a Navy submariner, and despite that, a good guy. Roy was nice enough. I sent him a cold email, and he was nice enough to meet me in Palo Alto. And then he took my resume and he went and found it and walked it over to a recruiter. And that may sound like a small thing, but again, that changed my life. That single act changed my life and gave me confidence in looking at someone like Roy and say, gosh, while I feel completely, I'm living in this imposter syndrome, and there's a guy who's like me, who has made it and who has been successful. And who was willing to, I'm sure he was busy as hell, and he took time on a Friday night to go meet me in Palo Alto. He was married, he had a kid at the time. That was a really selfless gesture on his part that had a really big impact. And so for me, I've always tried since then to say, gosh, if each one of us, we have this shared set of experience, we know how impactful our background and experience can be. So it's not just selfless, it's actually a great thing for all of these organizations. It's a great thing for the Valley. And it's really cool to see. I mean, gosh, I know it's been almost 20 years now, but now the story is totally different in the Valley. Most technology companies now have an explicit focus on hiring veterans because they understand and appreciate the impact that they can bring and how transformative they can be for the culture. And, that's an amazing thing to see.
That exists. And I'm not trying to make you feel good because, I like to criticize Marines or knock them, but I think that exists because of your journey. Truly. I think you are a major part as to why startups and rocket ship companies are we should hire veterans, because you're, in my book, the poster boy for
Captain America.
Yes, for making that happen.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's clearly not just me. And again, a lot of it is, it's this crazy, I chose the right internship at this moment in time where I got to be the person who was at these companies, and that was super cool. And there's a bunch of other folks who have gone on to do some other veterans who have gone on great things. But I do think there is something in being an example for someone who's unsure. And for me now, both my brothers are veterans. They both transitioned. They're both doing great things. They both work in tech. I've probably now talked to certainly hundreds of veterans. And I think every veteran I've talked to goes through a similar journey, right? You come off active duty with at least, this confidence in what you've done, pride in what you've done, a set of skills. You start that transition and you have this oh shit moment. It's scary and it's hard. And the beginning of it, everything feels unfamiliar. The language feels unfamiliar. Your first interviews don't go well. You feel like a fish out of water. And now I know, so I'll always tell veterans, you're gonna go through this. You're gonna have a moment where you're gonna say to yourself, why did I make this mistake? I'm never gonna get a job. I'm never gonna be able to find a job that I'm great at and that I love. And just being able to hear that and see folks who have been through it, I think is really helpful for a lot of folks.
I tell every veteran who's kind of in a rough spot that I want someone, and hopefully myself, to be there, Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, where I'm like, it's gonna be okay.
Yep.
And like, I'm so confident, having seen now so many veterans not just like flourish, but like go through moments where just like, I can't get a job. It's like, no, you will, and you will crush it.
Totally.
CrossFit in the military. When I was in the military, CrossFit was a big deal. Like there were people like, hey, this is how I'm not only just doing PT, I'm doing CrossFit. I feel like there's a healthy number of people in the military who still do CrossFit, and that they're kind of the most devout. And I'm curious, like, how much of the overlap is that?
Yeah, so a lot of CrossFit's early growth was in the military and law enforcement communities. So I think that the methodology, the culture resonates really well. I mean, part of I'd say early ethos in and around CrossFit was an extremely hardcore, workouts, lay on the floor, and I think in particular parts of the military and law enforcement that really resonated. It is also a huge part of CrossFit is, you mentioned this earlier, is this group dynamic, the community, the bonds that are formed when you do hard things together, things that we're very familiar with as veterans. It's a core part of what we do, but for the average civilian who hasn't experienced it, sometimes that's not something they have in their life. And so that notion of like doing hard things together, I think just clicked and resonated really early. We are now getting back to, so the military went through a whole host of, on the physical fitness side, different programs, different approaches. CrossFit was a little tricky because as a brand, it was a little hard for the military to endorse a specific brand per se. But we, over the course of the past year or so, we've been doing a bunch of work with the Army actually. So, as you may be aware, a lot of the physical fitness measures in the military are trending in a bad direction. The Army rolled out a new physical fitness course,
The Army
test.
Combat Fitness Test, which
Right.
I'm taking next week.
Yeah, it's great.
Very CrossFit-y.
It is. It's a great test. So the ACFT, it's meant to be a better measure of holistic fitness. They rolled out this new test and they had super high failure rates. And so they've been struggling to figure out what do we do. And we got really lucky. A 3-star named General Chris Donahue, West Point guy, again, West Point, but still a good guy. Had actually discovered CrossFit back in the early 2000s, talked a bunch of smack about it at the time, discovered it later. He shows up to take command at the time of 18th Airborne Corps as a 52-year-old and beats 99% of his corps on the physical fitness tests and said, great for me, but this should not happen. And so we've been working actually to train every single NCO in the Corps on CrossFit. And fundamentally, it is just how do you run small unit training? The military had actually taken out, it's a bit of a shame, but it had outsourced physical training. So it hired strength coaches, independent civilian strength coaches, and said, you handle physical training. The results haven't been great, and one of the inadvertent consequences is one of the best ways that you build unit cohesion and train young leaders is by giving them a chance to run physical fitness and bringing soldiers and Marines together. And so it's been really cool to see us. We've gotten a chance to work, and we're seeing really awesome results. Like the ACFT scores are increasing for the first time in 4 or 5 years.
The old Army PT test was very vanilla. It was 2-minute push-ups, 2-minute sit-ups, 2-mile run. Now there's a sprint drag carry, there's a deadlift, there's the plank, and there's it's much harder. And I can see so much aspects to CrossFit within it. Mm-hmm. Back to grad school. Did your time at grad school influence in any way how you could be valuable within the tech industry? And also, does it help you even now in terms of thinking about problems?
It's funny, I get this question a lot when I go, I went to the GSB, I went to Stanford, and often I'll go back and talk, and they'll ask me how valuable grad school was. To be honest, not really. And now I'll say I'm really grateful for that experience because, one, I met an incredible group of people, and I wouldn't give that up for a second. So some of my closest friends to this day are folks that I met in grad school. Honestly, through that, actually, I've had the opportunity through weird different ways to work with some of them before and have business opportunities. But to be honest, did I walk out of grad school as an expert on business? Did I walk out with skills that helped me on day 1 or day 2 of my job? Not necessarily. A lot of the things that I think did it help me in terms of a basic understanding of some of the frameworks and some of the different domains from a business perspective, yes. But now, I talk to a lot of folks. I still think grad school is an awesome path. I loved learning. I really appreciate it. When I was getting active duty, I would tell people it's a necessary path. If you're a veteran and you want to go work at one of these companies, you pretty much have to go that route. That is not the case anymore. It's still a great route, but it's not a necessary one. So a lot of folks, at times I'll just ask folks like, hey, what's the motivation? Like, there's the knowledge and learning is amazing. Being in an academic environment can be really, really inspiring, I think. It's a great opportunity to meet people from different backgrounds and walks of life. And for me, honestly, it was a great 2-year break after getting out of the Marines where I could learn how to be a normal human being. So.
We talked about your career choices, Marine Corps, sadomasochistic. I was talking to a Navy SEAL like a week or two ago, and this is a thoughtful one, not one who's going to write a book. But he said that a lot of people who are these like hard chargers have somewhat of a hero complex. It's like I will be the guy who saves my unit on the battlefield. I will start a company and make massive and hire and bring on people. But that same hero complex can sometimes be selfish, in that like it's about you and like you're the martyr, but it's still about you. It's your legacy, and like that hurts like the family aspect of it. It's a long-winded question to like during the interview. One of the guys had asked you, your family, and I think you said 11, 8, and 6. Mm-hmm. Given your stints at these rocket ships, and given just how consuming CrossFit has to be, like, how do you balance that, and how do you like square this like professional kind of excellence with family?
Yeah. So I've been blessed with an amazing family, amazing wife. I have 3 daughters, 11, 9, and 7. It's a really fun age where they still like and talk to us. I know that's coming to an end here soon, so trying to take advantage of it. I remember coming out of, early, when I got off active duty, I was single. I didn't have family at that point. I was in a place in my life where I was really motivated, put my head down and just grind. And, my time at Google and Facebook really represented, I think, that phase. I met my wife at Google. We had our first, child when I was at Pinterest. And that, in very obvious way, changed my orientation. I'd also say, to be honest, as I've gotten older, my wife and I have been very fortunate to have some degree of success that allows us to think about opportunities without as much of the fiscal constraint, financial constraints as we did when we were younger, has given me the opportunity to kind of reflect on, really what matters and what drives us. And this has been a conversation, that Katie and I have together. And, for me, now I know that I've been able to be a lot more deliberate about how I prioritize things and the constraints that both my wife and I put in place. So, trying to be at home for dinner every night with the girls, trying to get to their soccer games, trying to be thoughtful about how much travel I have, trying to just actually be present and not stare at my phone 12 hours a day, which is really, really challenging. I used to be really, really bad at it, and I've tried to make it a priority and get better at it. I'd say there's also been a bit of I think I got to a point where, again, being a little bit older, having a few experiences, where I felt like I could still be a good leader at work without working 20 hours a day. I was not capable of doing that when I was 28. When I was 28, I had to answer every email in 4 minutes. I had to show I was the most responsive. It's embarrassing to admit, but be sending emails on the weekend. Now I know that shit doesn't really matter. And I have the confidence that I can show up and be an effective leader for organization and be a great husband and be a great dad. Now, it's not easy. It is super hard. And there's lots of moments, particularly when going through hard stuff at work, where I know it affects how present I am with our girls, how present I am with Katie. But, it's work in progress. And it's something that, I feel fortunate. My wife and I talk about it a lot. We try to be very explicit about how we're trying to show up for our kids, and we're definitely not perfect. And the moments when things get a little bit out of whack, and we've both been there. There are times when my wife has been there. There's times when I've been there. trying to make it something that we work on together.
Health and wellness is such a important thing in our lives. The military is really struggling with it, as you mentioned, and with recruiting. The recruiting, it's just people aren't healthy enough.
Yeah.
CrossFit is some of the most incredible elite athletes, and just people who want to get fit. Where do you think we are as a country in terms of health and wellness and fitness? And people are like, oh, I can just get Ozempic and look healthy. And so I feel like you have a really good view of like America. And
I have an opinion. I don't know if it's a good view, but yeah, look, I actually think, not to be Chicken Little, I think this is an existential crisis, not just for the military, but for humanity. So, if you look at over the last couple of decades, we are we can constrain it to the US, but a lot of these trends extend outside the US. We are wealthier than we've ever been. We've had, multiple decades of unparalleled technological advancement. We are sicker and less happy than we've ever been. Fundamentally, almost every meaningful measure of health and wellness is trending in the wrong direction. So, pretty soon 50% of adults in the US will be obese and at risk of metabolic disease. 30% of our kids now are obese. 80% of 17, 18-year-olds are physically ineligible for military service. So national security issues on top of these are kids at 18 who are destined for a shorter and less enjoyable life. Mental health, and it's not just COVID. So COVID certainly exacerbated it, but 1 in 14 girls self-harm now. 50% of US adults report unprecedented levels of loneliness and isolation. Suicide rates are up massively. We are in a really, really profound and bad place. And we live in a system where the healthcare system is not well suited to address it and actually candidly benefits from the state of things right now. And a lot of these issues are grounded in, the front lines here they're grounded in nutrition. They're grounded in fitness, and they're grounded in humans being around other humans. And increasingly, I worry about this because I think we have devices that we spend a lot of time staring at. Everything that's happening around artificial intelligence is going to make those devices even more challenging to look away from. And we just fundamentally know that connecting through a digital platform is not the same as being around humans. It just fundamentally isn't. And so, independent of CrossFit, this is part of, this is the big why for me around CrossFit. I feel like I've been so blessed in my life to have had the opportunity to play sports growing up, to be a part of teams, to be exposed to fitness early on in my life. It's something I love. It's something that's a part of my routine. I know for a lot of people, it's really hard. It's a real challenge. And, by virtue of that, I'm fortunate at my age to be reasonably healthy. And I hope to be able to chase my girls around and their kids around when I'm a grandfather. And that's possible. For most of our country that isn't. Longevity, health, the quality of life is all declining. And I worry, look, a shot in the arm every month is not going to solve this problem. There is zero chance. Can it be a part of the solution? Yes. But we have got to figure out how we prioritize nutrition and exercise. It sounds really basic and really simple, but those two things alone can have such a profound impact on people's lives. And I think there's such an existential risk for us. I am a little encouraged because I think there's starting to be an increasing level of awareness around this. I think people are starting to wake up a little bit to the importance of nutrition, to the importance of being around other people, to the importance of fitness. Talking more about actually the front lines of healthcare are not in the doctor's office. They're in the gym. They're in the kitchen. But we got a lot of work to do.
I've joked with you before that you have one of the best jobs. Like a professional athlete, you kind of get paid to work out. How can CrossFit help resolve this health issue that is, without a doubt, getting worse every day?
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge is so. It's interesting. If you had asked me when I start, I've been doing CrossFit now for about 10 years. I started up here in the city. I started the job about 1.5 years ago. And if you had asked me at the time about the benefits of CrossFit, when I started work here, having been in the community for 8 years, I would have said, hey, yeah, it's a great way to get fit. And yes, it benefits your health and your wellness. I actually think now the emotional and social benefits of CrossFit might actually outweigh or be on par with the physiological benefits. In a world in which, again, increasingly people are working from home, spending a lot of time on devices, not getting human connection, being around a group of people on a regular basis who you can interact with, who care about you, who support you, is something that fewer and fewer people are getting exposure to. We're not in offices, we're not spending time. For us, I'd say the benefit is, we've got, what we call a methodology, like the formula of what CrossFit is when you walk into a gym. It works incredibly well. And I've been privileged to talk to thousands of people who tell stories about, how it changed their life, saved their life, helped them recover from addiction, veterans who use CrossFit, the community and the fitness to deal with PTSD and psychological. So we've got this methodology that works. We have 13,000 gyms. So we have gyms in just about every community or pretty close to it. I think our biggest challenge is we have real perception issues around CrossFit. I think most people look at CrossFit and say, it's dangerous, or you've got to be really hardcore, or hey, I saw the CrossFit Games and I saw these insane athletes lifting crazy weights over their head. That's not
human
for me.
Specimens,
human specimens.
The most in shape people that perhaps I know have ever existed.
Yeah, and the truth is, if you walk into, has anybody in here ever done CrossFit before? Yeah, cool. If you walk into your average CrossFit gym, yeah, you're going to see some super fit people. You're also going to see people who are in their 60s and 70s. You're going to see people who are 2 weeks in who have never worked out and trained before. You're going to see people who have suffering from metabolic disease. And the beauty of the model actually is that you can have an elite athlete and a first timer working out right next to each other, and they can both have an extraordinary experience. Most people don't know that. That's our problem. We have these perception issues that really inhibit people from giving it a shot. And so that's one of the things we're trying to work really hard on is how do we shift that perception? How do we get more people in the front door? Just give us a couple of weeks. Let us, give us a chance to kind of show you what's possible. And then, that's one piece. The other thing we're trying to do is we're spending a little bit more time on advocacy work around this broader problem. So we're trying to partner with like-minded folks in the industry who share a similar point of view and conviction around the importance of nutrition, the importance of exercise in general, trying to influence our government to put more healthcare dollars towards upstream preventative measures. Let's not subsidize drugs. Let's get people into gyms. Let's help people. Let's subsidize healthy foods. Let's influence food companies to make healthy food, not super sugary addictive foods, which is most of what you'll see at the supermarket today. So that is a long battle. It's an uphill battle, but it's another part of what we're trying to do. I think collectively it's a big enough problem. We're going to need a lot of folks working on it.
I'm going to open up to questions. Actually, Barry, go ahead.
So, Don, we have a daughter who met her husband in CrossFit.
Love it.
They're
You're welcome.
But my question is, they travel and go to CrossFit.
Yep.
And according to them, you can kind of do your own thing at CrossFit, meaning it's not what I consider a traditional franchise.
Correct.
So my question is, how do you then control consistency, brand equity, awareness, and how do you deal with renegades out there that's a CrossFit gym that's not according to your values?
Yeah, great question, and one of the many reasons why this job is very challenging. So, to your point, Barry, part of early on, the guy who started CrossFit had a very kind of different approach and philosophy as it relates to building this business. He viewed the franchise as kind of the anti-model, and his idea was, look, I want to create a brand and a methodology, and then I want to create a model where we can attract highly motivated entrepreneurs and give them the flexibility to innovate. So let's give them the tools they need, but give them a lot of white space. Now, part of that worked extraordinarily well. So very low barriers to entry. It costs very little to open a CrossFit gym. There are some requirements, but they're very, very limited. It also comes with a whole host of challenges, which you articulate well. So we have not had a great way of managing quality. We have not done a lot and required a lot, particularly from owners, around how you run a business. So running a great CrossFit gym, it's not just being a great coach. You actually got to run a really effective small business and understand your P&L and how you invest. And so, for us, we'll never be a traditional franchise because that sense of autonomy for our owners is a core part of how they think about themselves and a core part of what they love. And so we have a little bit of this libertarian streak in our community where our owners will say, if you tell me to do something, even if it's good for me, I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to do what you tell me. And so it's a blessing and a curse. So, what we're trying to figure out now, and, the evolution for us is we will never be a traditional franchise. We actually think there's real value and power in the entrepreneurial model that attracts a unique type of owner who's incredibly mission driven and passionate. We think the fact that actually every CrossFit gym is a little bit different is amazing. You drop into a new gym, there's a different feel that supports different types of communities and different types of cultures. Our job is to figure out how do we preserve that sense of autonomy? How do we preserve and give that owner a sense of flexibility, but also control for quality, but also make sure that owner has the tools they need to run a good business? So we're starting to work on things. Really, the general philosophy and approach is invest in tools and resources, make them optional, but it's our job. So in a franchise, it would be required. You will use this software. Your gym will look exactly like this. You will buy equipment from here. We'll never go that route. What we'll do is we'll identify what we think are the biggest opportunities to elevate quality, to help them run good affiliates. We'll build great tools. We'll make them easily available. And then we need to do a great job showing these owners that partaking and leveraging these tools is good for them. Over time, what we're working on as well is so one of the things that we do at the parent level is as we manage the brands, we have a lot of people who come to CrossFit looking for a gym. Over time, we're going to send members to the gyms that do the best job. And so if we can create a set of incentives where you are actually rewarded as an owner of running a really effective gym that has high retention, great customer reviews, really good quality, then we'll start to influence behaviors in that fashion. But this is really, Barry, what you articulated is one of our biggest challenges. It's really hard.
Don, what are your thoughts on CrossFit legend Rich Froning?
He's a legend. So Rich is, so it's a little bit of kind of history. CrossFit Games have been around since 2007. They started to, early on it was kind of this scrappy competition that was put on at the family ranch of one of the employees. By 2010, 2011, you started to see a real professional elite athlete start to emerge who are training full time for it. Rich Froning, guy who now lives in Tennessee, was probably the most successful early male CrossFit athlete. He won 4 CrossFit Games as an individual. He went on to win a number of CrossFit Games as a member of a team out of his gym. It's called Mayhem, is what he calls his gym. And he's been kind of an ambassador for the sport. So he remains really involved. He's a great supporter of the community. He runs a gym. So one of the cool things that we've seen in our sport is we have a lot of elite athletes who started as coaches or gym owners. And they kind of grew up within the community, grew up within the ecosystem, know what it's like to be an affiliate owner. Rich is a really good example of that.
Just a quick question. No, thanks. Absolutely fantastic, and congratulations on your success. But I will challenge you on one thing.
Yeah.
Started a phrase, my leadership style was mission first, people always. And I think you're in the people business, which is absolutely fantastic. But you mentioned when you left, you were working, and you outstanding companies, obviously Google, Facebook, the 18 hours a day, the weekend, emails, answer every email within 4 minutes. And I would argue that what you were doing was setting yourself, it was a success. That was your secret sauce. You just worked harder than everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously brilliant, worked harder than everybody, but you were 28 and you had the bandwidth to do that. How would you, now as CEO, I'm sure you have young men and women under you who see your success, want to match that. How do you then help them, that 28-year-old, balance that work balance life?
Yeah, it's actually a great thing to push on because you're right. At that point in my life, I wouldn't change anything. I actually wouldn't go back and work 20% less because I think I wouldn't have had the opportunities. And I was still learning. So I can be a lot more efficient now because I understand and I've gained some degree of wisdom over the years. But I felt fortunate as a young single guy out of grad school to be able to just put my head down and grind and learn as quickly as I could. And everyone has, when I talk to folks on our team, everyone is a different place in their life. Some people, have the conditions and desire to grind. Some don't. That's okay. If I was a young father with young children at 26, 27, my calculus would have been different for sure. And so, for me, when I talk to folks on the team, a lot of it's about, okay, what do you want? What's most important to you? And then how do we think about how you create a plan that ultimately aligns with what you care most about? And there's no objectively right answer, right? For some people, that might be, I want to grind and I'm willing to make those sacrifices. For other folks, it might be, I'm not willing to actually. And the most important thing for me at age 27 is being home at 5 every day. Now, you have to recognize there are trade-offs between those two. And that's totally okay. And I think what can be problematic is if you don't reconcile, you can't get the same outcomes if you're fundamentally less willing to work hard and put fewer hours and have less of an impact. Doesn't mean it's wrong. That can be totally right for you, but I think it's something you need to be really conscious of. And there's nothing objectively right or wrong with either path. It's about what's best for you.
Yep. So we're going to have the Olympic Games in Paris in a few months, and I'm wondering if, since it's a global sport, are you going to contact the International Olympic Committee to try to get this in a future Olympic?
So it's a great question. We have had some conversations about this. The challenge is with the Olympic Games, you can't have a branded sport. So if we wanted to have CrossFit in the Olympic Games, it would have to be something like functional fitness. We would have to do it. There's a bunch of regulatory things around international governing bodies, effectively a bunch of bureaucracy that we'd have to go through. If I could wave a magic wand and have CrossFit as an event at the Games, would love to do it. Is it worth it right now, going down the route of rebranding the sport, joining a bunch of governing bodies? For us right now at our stage, relatively small team, it's just not the right timing for us. But I think there is actually a independent body, I think it's the International Functional Fitness Organization, that is actually trying to pursue and drive that. And if it happens, great. I suspect that what you'll see is a bunch of CrossFit athletes who are competing and dominating the sport. But for us, our most important assets are brand. And so we have to safeguard that and be really protective of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Don, I'm ready to hear from a fellow Marine and Naval Academy grad. My name is Howie, and my question for you is, given your strong background in tech and fitness, where do you see the convergence of both tech and fitness heading in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. So before I worked at CrossFit, I worked at this wearable startup called Athos. So we made a compression apparel with embedded sensors. For me, it was like the intersection of two things I loved. I love technology. I love, sports fitness, human performance. It was a great experience, and I think I left that with, I'd say, a few kind of lessons learned along the way. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in and around solutions for like the very top of the pyramid. So like very sophisticated offerings that allow you to optimize the last 2, 3, 4, 5%. That's what we built at Athos. We built a solution that was great for pro elite athletes that helped them mitigate their injury risk. We did some work in DoD that I thought was pretty cool. There's a bunch of other solutions in and around this that, and it could be around hyper precision nutrition, microbiome type stuff. There's a bunch of, I think continued evolution in things to inform your training. I think those are really interesting and compelling, but when I zoom out and look at like the big opportunity, the thing I hope to see most of the cycles put against are how do we make it easier for people to eat well and just exercise. Like if we can move the needle on that, if we can make it easier for people to have a healthy diet and build some routines around nutrition and just work out, meet the minimum requirements in and around exercise, I think that could be really transformative. There's some companies that have done some cool stuff. So there's a company called Verta Health that actually started by a guy I went to grad school with. That is, they basically help folks who suffer from diabetes. So it is a diet-based diabetes intervention. It is the experience essentially is they pair a person with essentially a nutrition coach There's some very basic data that's captured around their A1C levels. And that coach is there to be a support for them. So how do they support them? How do they coach them to eat better? And their outcomes are incredible. So they're getting people off of insulin. They're reversing type 2 diabetes by just eating better. Those are the types of things I would love to see. I think it's what I think what society needs the most. There are some other, I think, really interesting things happening now, in and around precision health. I'd say the other piece that I think is interesting is right now, who's had blood work done, like a physical done in the last year? Has anybody done any of this hyper, let's say more performance-oriented blood work, like an inside tracker or So if you look at your general blood panel, if you've got that done on generally the ranges that are articulated for that are healthy or really sick. And the healthy range is super broad. So it's meant to be like, do we need to put you on insulin or admit you to the hospital or sign you up for heart surgery? It's not meant to be actually, you know what, like your cholesterol level, your ApoB is a little bit too high. And actually over the next 3 or 4 decades, being a little bit too high in aggregate is really, really impactful. And so while you don't need emergency surgery, you do need to make some changes to your diet right now because it's going to really impact your health. It's not revolutionary, I'd say, from a technology perspective, but I think it's a real mindset shift to try to help people identify their state of health and some changes they can make to their daily routines that can be extraordinarily impactful. I think one of the better articulations of this that I've read is there's a guy named Peter Attia. You guys may have heard of him. He wrote a book recently called Outlive. And the whole premise of the book is about maximizing your lifespan and your health span. So live as long as possible and have the highest quality of life for as long as possible. And essentially the way he articulates the premise of the book is, let's just work backwards from what kills most people and avoid those things. And there's essentially, you could call us the 4 horsemen, heart disease, diabetes, I'm going to miss the other ones, which is embarrassing, and cancer, and I forget the 4th one. And then he just talks about, okay, what causes heart disease? Okay, elevated cholesterol for decades. Do you know where your cholesterol is? If you don't, you probably should. He talks about having a heart attack when he was 40 because he had genetic predisposition. So those are some of the things that I'm getting excited about. How do we educate people? How do we raise awareness? Again, I think the actual interventions are pretty basic. It's working out and eating well. It's just doing those things is really hard. So anything that makes that more approachable, that helps people with that, I think can have a really big impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So when you were talking
Can you introduce yourself real quick?
Sorry, Jeremy Smith, Navy consultant chief, if you will. That said, what you said about your company and where you're at with your gym owners, it reminds me of leading a division both, let's say, at a time of wars like the Iraq War, but also like post that. It's like there's not really a big thing going on. One, where do you see yourself at? Are you at war, or are you kind of at a time of peace? You're just trying to keep status quo. And then 2, like, what is your mission statement for CrossFit?
Yeah, so our mission statement, let me start with that and then I'll talk about how we get there, is to make the world a healthier place. So we've got this formula that we know can be transformative for people. It's touched a lot of people's lives. We want to take that and reach as many people as we can. And if we do that, we can create stronger communities, we can create happier people. This has real meaningful opportunity to have impact. The wartime, peacetime, maybe I'll dodge that construct. I'd say like we are in a transition and change period. We have to change, and we have to change within a community and organization that doesn't want to change. That there's a little bit of a paradox. I'll ask people all the time, hey, we've got a few million people who do CrossFit today. Do you think we can reach more? Absolutely. Should we try to reach more? Absolutely. Do you think we're on the path to reaching more right now? No. Okay, so we need to make changes. Yes. So everyone acknowledges we've got a bigger opportunity. It's going to require some degree of change. Okay, where are the changes you think we should make? That's where things get tricky. So we have this understanding that evolution is necessary, yet we have this thing that is so intrinsically connected for folks that it's really, really challenging. So we are in a state of transition, and what that requires from us from a leadership, I have to I have to push our team and community a lot, and we have to be really extraordinary at change management. We have to give people the surety that where we're going isn't going to ruin the thing they love and get them excited and inspired by it. We have to do it where, a little bit of what, the founder's articulation and like the rallying cry early is like business is bad. He was kind of genius in it. Business is bad. Making money is bad. Commercial outcomes are bad. The problem for us right now is we're a business. We got to make money. We have to make investments in things. If we go out of business, this whole thing crumbles. People get that rationally, but there's almost this like deeply embedded, if something we're doing has positive commercial outcomes, it's inherently bad. So we'll hear, oh, it's a money grab. Like, no, it's something that delivers real value to you. So that's on us. Like, that's about, like, we have to, I have to, for our team, evolve our paradigm and frame of reference. I have to give them confidence and surety that, hey, we can change our relationship with affiliates. We can hold them to a higher standard. We can, wait for it, raise prices for the first time in a decade. And we're not going to ruin this entire thing. In fact, it's going to make us stronger. And then we have to figure out how we do that with a very vocal, very loud, very engaged community as well. And we're midstream, and it's really hard.
Last question.
Maybe a, oh, sorry, was that me last question?
Yes.
Maybe a segue off of that of,
Jeff, introduce yourself too.
Jeff, USNC. You said earlier in the talk that 2023 was a great year. How do you define great? What makes a great year for you?
Mm-hmm.
What made a great year for CrossFit?
Yep.
What's the extent of those are
Sure.
the same thing?
Yeah, so in a couple dimensions, I'd say first, we are in the, as I mentioned before, we're in this turnaround and transition. So first, we made really big strides in evolving the team. So, we have, at the leadership level, we have 6 new leaders, super strong, bring a set of experiences, a passion for our mission. They have integrated and onboarded really well, which is a non-trivial thing at CrossFit. So they're getting along really, really well with the team. They've had a really big impact. So when I look at our leadership team, we're in a fundamentally different place than we were a year ago. So we've turned over almost our entire leadership team in a year, absent a couple roles. If we look then at the rest of the organization, when I started, we had a team of incredibly passionate, talented people. We were a dysfunctional team. The team did not work together. It was divisive. We were siloed. They had worked for a long time in a culture of, I'd say, of fear to some degree, of very, again, siloed execution. So our team is learning how to work as a team, how to work cross-functionally. We're not there yet, but we made really big strides last year as well on that front. On the business side, so we were not profitable. We lost money. And, my first, I joined in 22, midway through 22. We lost money in 2022. We were profitable last year. So on the financial side, we grew top line revenue. We grew, improved profitability. And we started to make some of the bigger changes in the longer term strategy. So we raised prices on gyms for the first time in 12 years. We knew that was going to be hard and very unpopular. It was. We were correct, but largely successful, and that's still something we're working through right now. So, I think really good success on financial outcomes and getting to a place where we have a path now to being financially where we want and need to be. We're profitable, cash flow positive. Team is moving in the right direction. We have a strategy now we're working against. The way the team is executing is strong. So that's at the core of it. How I would articulate what success looked like for us last year.
We have to end this. I have a few quick notes. First is the thing I think a lot about these days is leadership is destiny, and I say anytime I meet a company, a country, a nonprofit, I think take me to your leader. And if you see the leader and you can evaluate them, you can kind of say, how will that company or country be a few years down the road? With that in mind, I have extreme confidence in the success of CrossFit.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that if improve and revolutionize CrossFit, what the skills that you have could really benefit our military and our country. The next thing is some very rapid fire questions. Don't take more than a second thinking about it. Favorite movie?
Braveheart.
Favorite war movie, not Braveheart?
Full Metal Jacket.
Favorite song?
Ooh, Born to Run.
Favorite band?
Springsteen.
Favorite military moment?
Ooh, that's a hard one. My personal military moment? Coming home from Afghanistan.
Favorite book?
Beach Music by Pat Conroy.
When will you stop working?
Did my wife feed you this question? When I'm no longer having fun.
3 last notes from me. One is thank you so much, Gunny, and the whole Marines Memorial staff. You all do amazing work day in, day out. This is an incredible living memorial for all veterans. Second, thank you so much, Don Faul,
Thank you.
for what you've done for veterans in the Valley, for what you do with our health in our country. And then last, quick plug for CrossFit. I went to the local San Francisco CrossFit. It's incredible. They teach you functional fitness, and they really inspire you to become healthier. So heavily recommend CrossFit.
Check
Thank
it
you,
out.
Don.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much wraps up our presentation today.
Thanks, buddy.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation by the Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To become a member, donate, or learn more about our upcoming events, our programs, and our organization, please go to the Marines Memorial website at www.mmaf1946.org. Thank you for your support.